Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
The right time, not the right place.
Police in Kelowna ask for more video.
This is not today, woman.
After demonstrators disrupt a Remembrance Day ceremony. Also,
it's a lot of heartbreak, a lot of struggle.
Searching beyond the suburbs. The competitive hunt for housing has buyers looking further and further away. And
I know that I will always show up if there's a need for me to be here.
We're still up there enforcing the injunction. There's just less people to arrest.
Hunkering down and in. Protesters vow to wait out winter weather to try to stop more old-growth logging in the Fairy Creek watershed.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, thanks for joining us. As we showed you yesterday, Remembrance Day is a time for many to reflect on the sacrifices of those who served our country. Yesterday, though, some chose to disrupt services and vandalize a memorial. As Brady Strachan explained, several ceremonies in BC did not go as planned, and police are now looking at possible charges.
On a day reserved for reflection, tempers flared.
Not the right time, not the right place.
As people at this cenotaph in Kelowna, British Columbia, paid their respects to veterans in an informal ceremony, a group of protesters set up a mic to speak out against public health measures. Several people tried to stop the speaker.
The word that came to my mind was hijacked.
Erica Bell Lowther was with her children and grandchildren when the protesters showed up.
It was just disgusting. It was, just so disrespectful. I just don't get it. Like, they were acting like bullies.
A sentiment shared by Kelowna's mayor, who says anti-vaccine mandate protesters have gone too far.
Have some respect for the veterans who have contributed to this country and given you the right to protest, but be mindful of the fact that people didn't want you there on this particular day.
The RCMP say they're investigating this incident as a possible criminal offense. They say it would fall under a section of the criminal code related to disturbances of a religious service or social events held for a moral purpose.
That I believe that there were a group of people that were gathering for a moral, social, or benevolent purpose, and they were interrupted. And I believe that interruption was potentially criminal in nature. Yep.
This expert says the whole situation poses a freedom of speech issue, but that may not help the protesters' case.
I'm usually on the side of allowing for the widest possible scope for respectful debate and dialogue. But I think in situations like this, you want to get your views across, you want them to be heard, you want to try and convince people that your side is the more compelling side, and this isn't the way to do it.
And this wasn't the only concerning incident on Remembrance Day in BC. Police are also investigating a threat that stopped an official service in the nearby town of Lake Country, and pandemic-related graffiti sprayed on Cranbrook's cenotaph. The RCMP in Kelowna are asking anyone who recorded video of the incident to contact them. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna, British Columbia.
Almost 1,000 people tested positive for COVID-19 over the past 2 days in our province, and 23 people have died in that same time. Looking at the past 3 days, however, BC has recorded 34 deaths, and that is the highest since the end of January. 384 people are now in hospital. The number of patients in critical care rose to 124. It is an all too familiar problem. Potential homeowners in BC getting frustrated as homes become more scarce and prices soar. As Janella Hamilton shows us, an unwelcoming market is forcing a lot of would-be buyers to look beyond the suburbs.
Rochelle Kendall is busily packing boxes, getting ready to move. Her home in Abbotsford, BC sold quickly last month.
I was floored when, before we had even listed our house, I had 5 text messages from people in the area that knew we were selling saying, hey, can we come look at the house?
It's a competitive market many people across the Lower Mainland are experiencing. Less homes are for sale and prices continue to go up.
The market as a whole, we saw about a 40% decline year over year in listings, and combined with surging demand, the total amount of homes available for sale, just kept falling and falling and falling.
What we're seeing is a lot of influx from the west. We've had clients that are moving out to Chilliwack. They only have to go to the office once or twice a week, not the end of the world. And now they have a big yard and a big house and a beautiful view instead of being in a 2-bedroom condo downtown.
Merrick and Michele Mazziati are realtors in Abbotsford. They say this past year has been frustrating for sellers and buyers.
If you get 20 offers on a property, that's 19 buyers that are disappointed. That's 19 realtors that are disappointed that did the job they were supposed to do, but they didn't get the highest bid. And so it's a lot of heartbreak, a lot of struggle.
With a bidding war in play, people on the hunt for housing in BC are now being forced to buy beyond the suburbs.
We've got a lot of movement out to Vernon, a lot of movement out to Kelowna, Soyuz even. People are just kind of calling it quits on the valley.
And that's exactly what Rochelle Kendall did, choosing to move her family to Vernon.
In town in Vernon, you're looking at like $500,000-$600,000 less.
But if you do have your heart set on a home in the Fraser Valley or Metro Vancouver, Maddie Azzi says there are ways to navigate the competitive market.
You're in a situation where you've got to have your money in hand, and unfortunately, a lot of the times, no subjects. And that's a really tough spot to be in when you're buying blind.
A warning from real estate experts as the demand continues to rise. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Abbotsford.
Vancouver police are investigating the killing of a man in a downtown Eastside social housing complex. 43-year-old Joshua Howe was found dead yesterday morning inside his suite near Main and Cordova. Police say they have arrested a suspect. It is Vancouver's 15th homicide of the year. Police are asking anyone with information to contact them. The BC Lions are heading to schools across the province as part of a campaign to fight racism.
We don't pretend to take the place of teachers. We don't pretend to take the place of parents. But when our players go out into the schools and deliver that message to our youth, they capture our youth's attention. And it helps to support and supplement the messaging that they're getting, not only from their parents, but from their homes as well going forward.
The program, called Team Up Against Racism, is for students in grades 6 to 10. Players will visit at least 20 schools next spring to tackle issues like diversity, equity, and inclusion. The football club is partnering with the Education Ministry and will report on the results of the workshops at the end of the school year. If you're a SkyTrain commuter, you may notice some older model trains showing their age as they roll into the platform. Now, TransLink is looking into some new designs to replace some of those rusty cars. You're looking at a mock-up of TransLink's Mark V SkyTrain cars. So far, 200 have been ordered, with the first of these trains arriving in 2023. They're basing its final design on what a survey of what riders want to see and like to see. More flex space, leaning pads for those who like to stand, and different types of bike racks. There's also bench-style seating, though road seating will still be available near the middle. They also plan to make it more accessible for people living with disabilities.
Accessibility was also really important to us to make sure that all our customers are able to use our system.
To help with this, lights will shine every time the doors open and close to help riders who are hearing impaired. The passenger display screen will also allow more transit alerts and routes, show them, I should say. The Mark V trains will be fully rolled out by 2027. Even as winter approaches, protesters are digging in around the Fairy Creek watershed on Vancouver Island. Police arrested 8 more people this week there for disrupting logging work. As the CBC's Zara Premji explains, despite the rain and the cold, some anti-old-growth logging activists say they are not going anywhere.
Firewood arrives just in time.
Yesterday it hailed 5 times, thunder and lightning and heavy rains.
Fewer camper vans and trucks line the paved road as remaining protesters hunker down for the winter near the Fairy Creek watershed. Protesters have been in the area since last summer, trying to save one of the last standing old-growth forests not located in a park on southern Vancouver Island.
And I'm here because we need to breathe. We need this air for clean water.
And while the scene once looked like this, packed with protesters of all ages, now dozens remain, many leaving for university and others deterred by the weather. The rest still here, damp and determined, setting up in buses, under tarps, in their cars, wherever they can.
I'm always just on computers.
Promising to protect the area whatever weather rolls in.
I was here since March. No matter how or where or when,
I know that I will always show up if there's a need for me to be here.
We all live in Canada and we all know what these winters are like, and it's, you know, just a little bit of more of a layer having to be outside, but I think that that we're all going to pool together.
This is now considered one of the largest acts of civil disobedience in Canadian history. The RCMP says it has arrested 1,168 people so far, some of them taken away numerous times.
I think that the weather's a factor, lots of different factors, but we're still up there enforcing the injunction. There's just less people to arrest at this point.
But protesters say their fight is not over. The temporary injunction remains in place until next week. It bans protesters from blocking logging industry work. Last spring, lumber company Teal Jones, who has a license to log old-growth forests, sought an injunction against the protesters blockading their work, which the court granted.
We are doing legal operations, we're doing permitted operations, and on a daily basis we're having to deal with people that are doing illegal things.
And the logging company says it intends to fight to keep that injunction going in court next week for the thousands of people it employs in BC. Whatever the decision in court, protesters vow to stay. Zara Premji, CBC News, Vancouver.
If you weren't already, get ready for another wet weekend. An atmospheric river is set to sweep across BC's south coast, bringing up to 150 millimeters of rain by Monday morning. It's the second such rainstorm in the past 4 weeks, but Environment Canada says this one is different.
Yeah, this one's going to be a juicy system. We could see anywhere from 75 to 150 millimeters of rain. This time the origins are tropical, meaning we're going to see warm, moist system come through. And you know, this season was interesting because it started so early. Really, from September, October, and into November, we haven't had much of a break from the rain. The other interesting thing about this is the rising freezing levels. We're going to see the freezing level rise to mountaintops, meaning we can get rain up on the mountains where we've already seen snow this season. So we're going to have that combined factor of melting and added moisture from the rain.
Amy Bill, that's one way to call the weather.
Juicy.
Bobby, my goodness. Yes, indeed. It's descriptive.
It really does conjure up some thoughts. And that is all I will say.
Yes, why don't we get to the forecast?
Okay, yeah, we call it an atmospheric river, and that's just fancy for it's going to be really rainy all weekend. So enjoy it before it arrives. We will see clearing overnight, and then we will see this system. We're going to tap into that atmospheric river. It's just sitting off the Pacific, and it is going to hit us and hit us hard tomorrow night. And that will continue all through Sunday. We're even going to see the winds picking up. And as Bobby mentioned, we are going to see that freezing level raising dramatically. So all that snow we had on the local mountains will melt, and we will be getting rain. We also will see a lot of snow in the Kootenays, all those mountain passes, expecting up to 40 centimeters of snow, so it's definitely going to be a rough weekend for many levels. Tomorrow, though, we will start off with just a little bit of sunshine before we head into that rain. Really, really ramps up for Sunday. As I mentioned, we'll see those winds. That's when we're going to see the majority of the snow as well in the Kootenays and on those mountain passes. Still seeing the rain on Monday, but we get behind the system Monday night, and we actually have some drier and perhaps sunnier weather to look forward to on Tuesday. Nothing juicy about it.
No.
Nice and dry.
Yes, indeed. And we appreciate that.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The COP26 environmental conference was set to finish today, but things aren't quite done in Scotland. The deadline was pushed back with negotiations to hash out a final agreement resuming in the morning. As CBC's meteorologist Johanna Wagstaff reports, it's the ultimate results that may still not be enough.
We are officially into overtime here in Glasgow. The deadline has come and gone for countries to sign a new agreement. But negotiators seem prepared for this, stocking up on coffee and snacks throughout the day as they prepare to work through the night. Hearing from COP26 President that there will be an informal update on where we stand later tonight. So definitely watching that closely. But whether the final agreement comes together in the next few hours or the next few days, an agreement does look likely. This morning's draft was overall positive. There appeared to be significantly more balance between elements on adaptation, finance for damage and loss. And those were key sticking points earlier this week. Agreement between developing and developed nations on where that $100 billion fund for the countries hit hardest by climate change stands. And also the fact that phasing out fossil fuels, that language remains in the final draft this morning. Still questions about how much more watered down that text will get, but it's in there as of this morning. Major sticking points, though, still Article 6. That's the language that provides the mechanisms for countries to trade carbon credits. When Canada's Environment and Climate Change Minister was asked earlier today about this Article 6, he said Canada does not plan on using the provisions of Article 6, so does not plan on trading carbon credits internationally. Everything will be done domestically, but he doesn't rule out ever using that one day. And there is concern among human rights groups that this is a backdoor for countries to continue to operate business as usual. Today, the flip side to that positivity of a draft looking imminent, human rights groups, NGOs, climate activists ramping up their voice, staging protests and walkouts today, saying that not enough has been done and they would rather no deal happen than a weak deal. Ultimately, the pledges so far add up to warming of 2.4 degrees Celsius, a far cry from the 1.5 degrees agreed upon in Paris. I spoke to a Kenyan climate activist earlier today about her disappointment so far these past 2 weeks.
I would say it's been exhausting, because we came into COP26 with all of this energy and expectation that we will get the right answers back to our people. So I would say, being the last day of COP, I thought I would have been more happier, but again, looks like I am more frustrated and just really thinking to myself, what the leaders listening to us for the rest of the days at COP26, or were we just given platforms to speak to them, and yet their hearts and their minds and their decisions were not with us.
And indeed, in the latest draft text, the UN urges countries to recommit new pledges in 2022. So whatever draft we come up with, or whatever new agreement countries come together with, ultimately having to go back to the drawing board when it comes to individual countries' new pledges to get closer to 1.5 in 2022. Johanna Wagstaff, CBC News, Glasgow.
The ocean's not going to stop rising. We still have to take action. We still have to do the work.
As global temperatures rise, so do sea levels. What the city of Vancouver is doing to prepare for the inevitable. That's coming up.
In the year 2050, how will BC look? From agriculture to cities, how will climate change change life? Don't miss 2050 Degrees of Change, a CBC Vancouver original podcast, now available.
Thank you for staying with us in our commercial-free live stream on this Friday evening. Visitors at a national park in New Brunswick now have the opportunity to document climate change. All they need to do is take photos at 3 special cell phone stands throughout the park and send them to researchers. Have a look.
COSTI is a new citizen science program that aims to help Parks Canada, in partnership with the University of Windsor, to monitor coastal changes in national parks. So COSTI is a fun combination of 2 words from the coast and selfie. So essentially, COSTI is a photo of the coast, which is then uploaded and helps us to monitor changes in the coast that are due to climate change. So there are 3 stands in our national park. One of them is right here at Ryan's. So once you find a stand, it's very simple. You get to the stand and there is a cell phone holder. So you place your cell phone in that little slot, and the picture will, the frame will dictate where the picture, what picture will be taken. So you take a picture, and then there is a poster right underneath the cell phone stand that explains exactly how to upload it and which ways to upload it and where that photo will go. So once you upload your photo and you look at the QR code, it will prompt you to upload it onto the website directly, which is the coastycanada.ca website, where the University of Windsor then has access to it and identifies some of the changes that we've seen. And we will literally be able to see that change in the pictures throughout the seasons and the years. Here in Kushabuguak, we've seen a lot of changes with the shoreline retreat. We've also seen some changes in the coastal erosion and the dune erosion and recovery. We've seen an increase in frequency and severity of storm surges and a change in the ice coverage of the dunes over the winter. The point really of this Coasty program is to involve the visitor in collecting data. We know visitors love to take pictures, and we want to really take that information and use it for conservation purposes. Down the line, this will help us to find ways to mitigate climate change impacts, and potentially this will help us to create new types of maybe buildings that can be relocated due to those erosion on the coast.
The number of COVID infections across Canada is rising. If this becomes a sustained wave, it would be Canada's 5th. Katie Nicholson looks at whether the country is on course to repeat a deadly history with this virus and what's being done to avoid that.
A blast of winter in Manitoba drives people indoors, with COVID already surging.
If we don't take further steps, we certainly are at risk of overwhelming that healthcare system again.
A sharp spike in the province's COVID numbers, forcing new rules and restrictions on some gatherings, which take effect this weekend, prompting criticism the government should have done more earlier.
Here we go again.
In Ontario, daily numbers also climbing in exponential growth. And new modeling projects a volatile and uncertain future.
I mean, it's certainly concerning.
Roger Yang designed this new restaurant with acrylic walls and air filtration. He's okay if Ontario also brings back some limits.
I think it's probably a good idea at this point to have capacity restrictions anyway.
There are rumblings from some epidemiologists, perhaps everything reopened too quickly.
A little bit. I think that it was a gigantic mistake, a colossal mistake, an obvious mistake to let stadiums open at full capacity.
Still, with vaccinations, this wave is different.
It's an absolute game changer. If we did not have vaccination, we would be locked down right now.
But children under 12, overrepresented among new infections, haven't been able to get the shot. Today, new hope for them.
And we expect to have a final decision in the next 1 to 2 weeks. So that's for the Pfizer in children.
There is a big sigh of relief to be able to think, oh, my whole family can be protected.
And hopes that maybe this year her daughter will be able to see her grandparents at Christmas.
I'm just grateful that there's hope on the horizon, that we can resume some sort of normal.
Relief possibly a few weeks away, but closer than it's ever been. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
Health Canada just added another vaccine to this country's booster shot arsenal, Moderna. A third dose of that vaccine is now authorized for people 18 and older. The Moderna booster is intended for those at least 6 months after their first 2-dose series, just like the Pfizer booster, which was approved earlier this week. The guidelines for who gets boosters vary from province to province. After nearly 14 years, pop star Britney Spears has been freed from her conservatorship. The scene outside the LA courtroom was jubilant. The judge ended the arrangement that had been in place since 2008. Up until recently, Spears' father had almost complete control over her life and $60 million estate.
Britney, as of today, is a free woman, and she's an independent woman, and the rest, with her support system, will be up to Britney.
Earlier this year, Spears gave compelling and grim testimony about life under that conservatorship, outlining her father's control over everything, even her birth control. The 39-year-old thanked her fans via social media and celebrated what she's called the best day ever. Call it a trickle-down problem. Supply chain issues brought on by the pandemic are challenging many businesses, causing shortages and delays across the country. As Julia Wong shows us, it's flowed into the alcohol industry, including winemaking in the Okanagan.
At this Edmonton area brewery, Matthew Atkins and his team are canning their latest batch of craft beer. But because of the pandemic, the process has become tricky.
And the wireman from Germany.
Getting some ingredients from overseas is now a struggle.
It's these specialty grains that we're just not able to necessarily always get reliably all the time.
Another issue, getting cans.
The brewery normally buys cans as they need them, but because of supply chain issues, well, they're stocking up.
And breweries are not alone. Wineries and distilleries are being hit too. Everything is more expensive, says this supply chain expert, from packaging materials to higher commodity prices to increased transportation costs.
The spot price for a container coming into the U.S. from China has gone from $2,000 just prior to the pandemic to $20,000.
Over in British Columbia, this Kelowna winery is seeing shipping delays of up to 2 months to get glass bottles from overseas.
We've tried to fast track our orders for 2022 to ensure that the glass that we need is reserved and shipped as soon as it's available.
Both businesses say they may have no choice but to pass extra costs on to customers, about an extra $1 to $3 per bottle at the winery.
I do think that most businesses are seeing a 5 to 10% increase in their costs that are going into their product.
As for Atkins, he's pushing forward, doing what he can to keep his 3-year-old brewery afloat.
We definitely need to make sure that we stay competitive and we can pay our bills, but that profit that we have to pay our bills is getting smaller and smaller.
Yet another struggle for small businesses in an already challenging economic climate. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
It's not the first place you'd think would be talking about the orca family J-pod. Why the whales are the talk of the Smithsonian in Washington. That's next.
The battle for the job of mayor of Vancouver is into its last days. Voters make their choice on Saturday. And what a cast to choose from, more than 20 candidates in all. Several are serious contenders. As for the others, well, let's just say they're entertaining. Ian Hannah-Mansing reports.
What do Sandy Beach, the captain, and Wretched Ethel have in common? They're 3 of the 23 candidates running for mayor of Vancouver.
The long ballot comes after changes to the civic election rules. A $300 deposit used to be required. Now there is none. All a candidate needs is the signatures of 2 registered voters. The changes were supposed to make it easier to run, and they did.
Alexander Benson is a university student by day, musician by night. He's on the ballot under his stage name, Sandy Beach.
When I first got into it, it was for a joke, just because it was like, sure, I can do that, and we'll do it and get a huge long ballad. And then once I've got into it, and it's like realized that it is a semi-serious type of thing, and I don't want the whole process to be taken as a complete joke.
One of Beach's rivals is the captain. He has a pair of second-hand stores and enjoys something of a cult following from his late-night TV ads.
I'll jump through hoops for you.
Such notoriety, though, may come with a political price.
Campaign's not going as well as I thought. A lot of people aren't taking me seriously.
There's 3 people here today. We have entirely
different approaches to this city.
Being taken seriously is not a problem for at least some of the candidates. 3 of them at this Board of Trade meeting debated issues like the pace of construction and development, and at least one is not impressed with his less orthodox rivals.
Democracy is a serious thing. It's a treasured thing. It's a great part of Canada, and a lot of countries in the world would like to have it, and I don't like to see it go into an area of comedy theater.
Wretched Ethel might disagree. That's the name of this band and the name the lead singer is running under.
What would you do once you got in office?
I would rather leave that on comment, non-comment.
Because you're not sure what to do, or you just don't want us to know?
I would rather for you to not know.
The last municipal election here drew just about 20% of the eligible voters, and even with this year's colorful roster of prospective mayors, none of the candidates is predicting this Saturday's turnout will be much higher. Ian Hannamansing, CBC News, Vancouver. Here are some of the stories we're following tonight for you on CBC Vancouver News.
There were a group of people that were gathering for a moral, social, or benevolent purpose, and they were interrupted. And I believe that interruption was potentially criminal in nature.
Mounties in Kelowna are asking the public for video and information after demonstrators disrupted a Remembrance Day ceremony yesterday. They set up a special email that people can send videos to.
We've got a lot of movement out to Vernon, a lot of movement out to Kelowna, Soyuz even. People are just kind of calling it quits on the valley and going, this is too much.
BC's challenging housing market is prompting potential buyers to look beyond the burbs. Some people keen to stay in the Lower Mainland are being told to drop any subjects they have money in hand, and even forego home inspections. But all those things bring risks too.
We all live in Canada and we all know what these winters are like, and it's, just a little bit of more of a layer having to be outside, but I think that that we're all going to pool together.
On a daily basis, we're having to deal with people that are doing illegal things.
Their numbers have shrunk, but some protesters are hunkering down near the Fairy Creek watershed to try to stop more old-growth logging in that area. Mounties have arrested more than 1,160 people so far. A temporary injunction banning protesters from blocking logging work remains in place, at least until next week. Over 2 weeks at COP26, negotiators have worked towards key milestones. One, to keep global temperatures from going past 1.5 degrees. Rising temperatures mean rising sea levels, a reality the city of Vancouver is preparing for, not because it might happen, but because it is. As the CBC's Stephen Quinn found out, getting ready has planners rethinking everything from shorelines to the seawall and how new buildings ought to be designed.
My name is Angela Daniluk, and I'm a senior sustainability specialist at the City of Vancouver.
And your specialty is?
Biology, actually, marine ecology, to be precise. And I work on adaptation to sea level rise and biodiversity at the City of Vancouver.
Over the course of COP26 in the past 2 weeks, we've been hearing an awful lot about sea level rise, and I know this is a preoccupation of yours. This is your main focus at the City of Vancouver. Tell me what we're in for.
Right, we are expecting about 50 centimeters of sea level rise by 2050, and then about 100 to 1.4 meters of sea level rise by 2100. And yet we know that there'll be more sea level rise coming, perhaps 200 centimeters by 2200.
And what is the impact of that on a city like this?
Right, the City of Vancouver, we were, built at a time when water levels were pretty predictable and we didn't know or think about sea level rise. So we are very vulnerable to the slow impact of sea level rise as well as the sudden impact of a coastal storm surge that could happen when we have a high tide and sea level rise. So that will cause overland flooding within our communities.
And let's talk about the St. Paul's Hospital site, because again, in the predictions, that's going to be potentially underwater by 2100. What has been done to mitigate the impact of sea level rise on that site?
So over the lifetime of that hospital, it will experience a range of climate impacts: extreme heat, drought, extreme rain, also coastal flooding. And so we think it's the first time in Canada that a complex health facility like St. Paul's has gone through such a comprehensive climate risk assessment. So they're doing that, and they're actually building the hospital to 5 meters, so quite high.
And is this the future of this city? I mean, with all of the development that we see, shoring up against sea level rise.
Yes, it is. I mean, we're a coastal community. We're going to have to respond to sea level rise. We're not alone in this challenge. There are other cities around the world who are also responding. And for areas like False Creek, I mean, we can expect to see in the future, different shorelines, softer shorelines that are raised higher. The seawall might move either in elevation or in location as we respond to sea level rise and coastal flooding.
When it comes to mitigating the overall impacts of climate change, does this feel like a defeat?
I think it feels like a challenge. I mean, it's irreversible. Sea level rise is here with us, so we need to do something. This opportunity to adapt is a really great chance for us to change things, to make our shorelines, more suitable for canoe culture, for more hospitable for forage fish. We have herring in False Creek, so we can make, a home for them while protecting ourselves, our critical infrastructure, and things like the roads that keep our businesses, running.
You gonna eat fish out of False Creek?
Well, not yet, but I know sometime in the future I will be able to.
We have had a heat wave over the summer that killed 600 people. We've had, I don't know if these storms are normal for this time of year. We've had a tornado touchdown at UBC. This is happening right now, is it not?
Yes, climate change is happening right now. We are experiencing it.
I guess the question I get asked all the time is, where is the urgency?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. I mean, leadership matters. Leadership at all levels of government is really key to advancing climate action. That being said, there's a lot of grassroots activity happening that is moving climate action forward. So it's my hope that, COP26, that they will deliver some stronger language, that they won't water it down. But that being said, I mean, we still have to take action. We still have to do the work. The ocean's not going to stop rising. So come Friday, if they water it down or not, I'll still be here trying to figure out what to do about sea level rise with my colleagues.
Right. Angela, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stephen Quinn, host of CBC Radio's The Early Edition, speaking with the Vancouver sustainability specialist, Angela Danyluk. Now, they may be 4,500 kilometers away, but the whales of the Salish Sea are making their presence felt in the U.S. Capitol, where the J-pod orcas are the talk of the Smithsonian. Next. And at 6:36, a live look at Victoria's Inner Harbour. Clear skies tonight, but brace yourself. Heard that before. There's a lot more rain on its way. Your BC-wide weekend weather forecast and beyond with Amy Bell after this.
In the boreal forest of Manitoba, summer opens a vast hunting ground for one of Canada's most voracious predators. Most of us will never see this little-known creature, as their hunting territory is hidden away. These dark, damp subterranean tunnels are the domain of one of Canada's most bizarre species. The star-nosed mole. Its hairless nose is ringed by 22 elegant fleshy tentacles. Despite their diminutive size, the moles are great excavators. They have large spade-like paws to shovel through the moist earth, allowing the mole to break into new territory. They are almost blind, so they navigate their world using their extraordinary nose. The tentacles contain 30,000 sense organs, making the mole a very efficient hunter. Star-nosed moles are the world's fastest eating mammal. The time between finding, identifying, and wolfing down their food can be less than a quarter of a second. During the summer, the moles can expand their hunting territory. It's one of the few creatures that can smell underwater. The mole searches for prey by blowing out a bubble of air. Slowed down 50 times, we can see how the mole uses its tentacles to hold the bubble in place before inhaling it. It samples the air molecules trapped inside for the smell of prey. It's caught the scent of an earthworm from under some decaying leaves. The mole's fantastical nose turns its summer aquatic habitat into a field of plenty.
COP26 isn't over quite yet. At the UN Climate Summit, world leaders are still being pushed to strengthen targets. UBC political scientist Catherine Harrison is in Glasgow and has seen various drafts as details are being hammered out. She explains the pressures on Canada and what our elected leaders need to do now.
Well, I kind of fluctuate between being very discouraged and even frightened about the degree of climate change that we face, and on the other hand, stubborn optimism. We are making progress. It's too slow, but I think 1.5 isn't dead yet. It's being put on life support, and I think there's hope. Canada's pledge of a 40 to 45% reduction by 2030 is less than other countries would expect from a very carbon intensive and wealthy country. The challenge we face is that we did so little for so long that means a 40 to 45% reduction from today until 2030. So it is pretty ambitious. The federal government has put in place the kinds of policies that will be needed and has promised others. So I think other countries are cutting Canada some slack for that. But there's a lot to do, and there is no time to lose to develop those regulations for oil and gas emissions, zero emission vehicles, a clean electricity standard, and tighter methane regulations. The key thing that hasn't been in place in with previous international pledges is our new Net Zero Climate Accountability Act. So Mr. Guilbeault will have to come this spring to the House of Commons with a plan for how the government will meet the 2030 target and beyond, and will be accountable for that.
Until roughly 40 years ago, Lake Figabeen was one of the largest in West Africa. Now, all you see are sand dunes. Many of the communities in northern Mali once supported by that lake are long gone or barely surviving. Here's some of the stories from people who have seen the land change right before their eyes.
All this area was covered by water. Then the water receded and the trees started to grow around the lake. Then the trees started to disappear and people grew crops where the trees used to be. During the first rebellion, displaced persons arrived. They destroyed the forest. And once the forest was gone, sand dunes formed. I prefer arable to livestock farming. You don't have much in the way of expenses. You grow crops and you harvest them. Here there was a big forest, and before that there was a lake where we used to grow our crops. The forest grew throughout the droughts, but after the forests came the subterranean gas. The gas destroyed all the trees we had. You see this? The sand dune wasn't there before. It came into the school from the right. The ground was flat between those two blocks. The biggest investment that's needed is not to distribute aid to people. What's needed is to try and identify the cause of the problem and resolve it. And that means stabilizing the dunes so as to immediately halt the erosion and to fill the lake with water again so that people can earn a living.
Amy Bell is back with our forecast. Song remains the same, doesn't it?
Yes, it is going to be wet. Unfortunately, we are going to see a lot of rain this weekend. In fact, we'll be tapping into another atmospheric river, the second one we've seen in about 4 weeks. So that means intense rainfall, and it's going to be quite a long-term event. It'll begin Saturday night or late afternoon and continue right through until Monday morning. So we'll see upwards of about 150 millimeters of rain for us here in the Lower Mainland, Howe Sound, areas of the Sunshine Coast. We'll also see that snow level dramatically raising. So all the snow that we've seen on the local mountains will begin to melt, and we'll see rainfall falling. So we do have that risk of flooding, and of course that is going to raise a lot of the stream levels. So we'll have to keep an eye on things. It will translate to snow for areas such as the Kootenays, all those mountain passes on the provincial highways. So Sunday you could see up to about 40 centimeters. We can see this monster system making its way towards us, obviously hitting Vancouver Island first. I would say by tomorrow here around noon is when we'll first start to see some of those showers moving in, and it will just continue to intensify throughout the evening. Sunday will be the real stormy one. We'll see lots of rain and wind as well, so the potential for a lot of debris to come down. Unfortunately for Vancouver Island, you're not going to catch much of a break, whereas some areas on the mainland will see sunshine to start tomorrow. For the most part, you are going to be seeing those showers fairly early on. You'll catch a little break with clouds, and then that heavier rain arrives. Maybe see a little bit of sunshine, though, for Vancouver. Out in the Fraser Valley, you'll start off with some sunshine as well, and Prince George looking great tomorrow. Nice mix of sun and cloud. You finally catch a break up at Williams Lake. You get that temperature going up to 4 degrees, lots of sunshine. But yes, we'll start to see that snow falling in the Kootenays tomorrow. So it is definitely going to be a very wild and wet weekend for most areas, and we will certainly have to keep an eye on things. Taking a look at our 5-day forecast, as I mentioned, chance of some showers this evening, and then we will see things drying out overnight. Tomorrow morning, we'll start off with a nice mix of sun and cloud, but it's not going to last. We'll see intensifying cloud as we head towards the noon hour, and then once that rain arrives, it's not really going to let up. So very wet Saturday evening and overnight. Sunday, as I would say, the main event. We're just going to see a lot of rain. Those winds will pick up. You're laughing, but well, just wait till we get there.
I've heard this before. Okay, sorry for interrupting.
And then Monday, we see that rain. Finally, though, we get behind it, and then we'll see some sunshine for Tuesday. Back to some rain on Wednesday.
Wow, we all love those sunny songs about Tuesday. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
Well, people are experiencing the world of BC's famous orca family, J-Pod, on the other side of the continent. An immersive new exhibition at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. is bringing people very up close to the whales. As Susanna Da Silva reports, the exhibit is educating people about J-Pod's endangerment through augmented reality.
Despite being more than 4,500 kilometers away, it feels like J-Pod is literally within reach.
So let me introduce a young J-Pod orca that bears the burden of the future of her family and her home. Her name is Kiki.
Augmented reality glasses allow visitors to experience the threats to the orca's existence, including boat noise that interferes with their ability to hunt. There are only 73 southern resident killer whales left in the world.
Since I was a little girl, I was fascinated with this population of orcas that lived off the Pacific coast, so much so that I've actually made my home here.
The project was created out of a chance meeting between a Nova Scotia-born film producer and an employee of a UK-based tech company.
How can we create something using tech to help this family, help bring awareness, and ultimately save their ecosystem and their home?
So from everything from the saddle patches to the genders to the sizes to the relative scale, we really tried to bring as much as possible for there. So people do feel like there is a grounding in reality. It's not just cartoon orcas swimming around, but we want to make them feel a sense of connection and, and hopefully then an affection.
And it was a connection through Microsoft that brought the exhibit to the attention of the Smithsonian staff.
I am a Midwesterner, so I had to ask, where's the Salish Sea? Now I know. And the more we talked, we realized it was a really good fit.
As the museum has set a goal of doing more to inform visitors about the impacts humans are having on the natural world, staff felt the message was important, even for visitors who may not be near any ocean at all.
They may never get to the Northwest, but still they have an association that there are creatures in the world that are either endangered and perhaps I can help in some way.
It's like a knife-edge change in behavior.
Researching whales has been the lifelong work of Andrew Treitz. He is thrilled to see the whales being featured on such a prominent stage at a time when he says all attention to their plight is helpful, especially internationally.
It tells me that what we're doing here matters. Maybe also it sort of puts a bit more pressure on us to get it right, because we know the world is watching.
His team recently compared the declining southern resident killer whales, including J-pod, and their thriving nearby cousins, the northern residents. Both rely on declining Chinook salmon runs, but to their surprise, the southerns actually had more fish to eat, raising more questions about why they're declining and where the biggest threats are, possibly in U.S. waters.
Their territory, their habitat goes from here, our home, all the way down to California. And we need to be sure that everybody is looking at their backyards as being the home of the southern resident killer whales. But if we don't look elsewhere and realize that a whale's got to eat every day of the year, I think we are dooming them to extinction.
An issue not lost on Adam Olson, a local MLA and member of the Sartlip First Nation.
The goal, of course, is to try to kind of bring back that relationship with nature that I feel we've lost.
An excerpt from one of his speeches in the legislature is in the exhibit.
It's a collective effort that's going to help save these whales, and it's going to require a global attention paid to them.
The next 10 years are crucial for the health of the jade.
And the exhibit's creators wanted to ensure visitors left knowing ways they could help.
So that's everything from what you use, how, you're watching your plastic, how you use plastic recycling, to what you consume.
A virtual experience with some real-world solutions.
These types of experience make you want to help and make you feel connected and actually give you that compassion and empathy for what they're going through. How did you feel when that big boat came by?
I didn't want it to hit any of the orcas.
And even from a distance, it seems connections are being made. Susanna Da Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
A rich archaeological find in Newfoundland. Not just any small change. The discovery after this.
They're the most studied and famous whale family in the world. What's pushing J-pod to the brink? I'm Gloria Makarenko, host of the new CBC British Columbia original podcast, Killers. Is it too late to save them?
People around me now, they look up to me and they're like, oh wow, we have a chef who's diabetic and is a pastry chef. Now I think those things keep me pushing and pushes me forward to achieve more goals, and it inspires people around me, and that's why I keep on doing this, and that's why I love doing this. Hey, I'm Nishant Amin, and I'm Canadian National World Chocolate Master. It's an amazing feeling when I won the competition. When I heard my name, that's when I thought, like, this is what I want. We had to produce 4 different segments of assignments, all being chocolate-forward flavors. Overall time, we have 8 hours. The first 3 hours we get is for prepping, and then every hour we present every product. It starts with a showpiece. Then after an hour, we have to present a bonbon. Then after an hour, we have to produce a vegan snack. And later on, we'll produce a fresh pastry. My showpiece was Go Green and Clean. So my showpiece represented a base that was a coral, which had a turbine, which produces your water energy. And on top of that, you had a globe with windmills and solar panels on houses, how we'll look forward for the future.
When he got into this competition, he went all in. That's all he did. That's all he thought about. That's all he dreamt about day and night. He came in early. He stayed late. He was making chocolates. So it's really no surprise to me that he won.
I'm going to represent this country. I love this country so much. It's one of those dreams coming true. It's a beautiful feeling. How to manage this disease, it's not an easy one. It's a full-time job, I would say, where you keep on checking your sugars at least 10 to 12 times a day. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 15. When I was diagnosed, it completely changed my world. There are a lot of things that you need to learn. Diabetes affects my work in a lot of ways. If my sugars are not normal, if it's high or if it's low, I do face challenges when working in the kitchen, especially at a busy restaurant service. Fundraising for this competition is really important for this competition is in general because there's a lot of cost. I'll be working at the restaurant as well and taking some time off from the restaurant to support my financial needs because of my higher medical cost from type 1 diabetes. I think it's really important for me to get those fundraisers in so that I can support myself, and financial assistance helps you mentally. I think that's one of the main goals. Unless and until you are not financially strong, you are not going to be mentally strong for this competition.
My advice to Nishant is just to really focus on the task at hand and focus on the challenge that there is, and don't get clouded by all the obstacles in your way. I'd really love to see Canadians step up and support Nishant. This is an incredible opportunity for him. It's an incredible opportunity for this country, and I think he's going to knock it out of the park.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. The Vancouver Podcast Festival returns. Enjoy virtual workshops, panels, and networking, and hear from acclaimed podcast creators, hosts, and producers. Learn more at vanpodfest.ca. And never miss a special programming series or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver Inbox and keep connected with us.
Italy's wine country is aglow with spectacular fall colors. Take a look. The breathtaking view, the foliage from high above the countryside in Italy's Umbria region. Stunning images of vineyards in the area bathed in glorious autumn colors. As the vines begin to die off, the rolling hills turn into a sea of orange, gold, and red. And sometimes, if you're lucky, Mother Nature lends a hand to make the scene even more magnificent. Just adds a rainbow. There's a newfound treasure at a familiar archaeological site in Newfoundland. As Chris O'Neill Yates shows us, a piece of silver that may be the oldest English coin ever discovered on this continent has been unearthed in the town of Cupids.
Even the driving rain couldn't deter Bill Gilbert from showing the spot where the precious coin was found.
My best guess is that it was lost by one of the colonists when they were building the enclosure wall or building the flanker in the fall of 1610.
Of the 170,000 artifacts uncovered at John Guy's settlement in Cupids, this one is the most thrilling find for Gilbert. One side of the coin bears the likeness of King Henry VII, who ruled England from 1485 until he died in 1509. On the other, the lettering says that the coin was minted in Canterbury, around the same time that Christopher Columbus and John Cabot embarked on their voyages to the New World.
It's probably the oldest English coin ever found in North America.
John Guy and his men landed in Cupids in August of 1610. This site was discovered in 1995. The digging began soon after to unearth the story of Guy's colony and to restore it. After the silver coin was discovered, Gilbert immediately enlisted the former curator of the Bank of Canada Currency Museum to give him an expert opinion.
It's a Henry VII silver half grout, which is a 2-penny or 2-pence piece, and it was minted in Canterbury sometime between 1493 and 1499.
That means the coin was in circulation for more than 100 years before it was lost here on the Guy plantation.
At the time it was minted, it was probably, in England, probably about a half a day's pay. So, I mean, not a fortune, but certainly you wouldn't want to lose it, you know.
It's a discovery that sparks the imagination, says Gilbert, when you consider the span of history it encompassed.
The Protestant Reformation, Henry's Protestant Reformation in England, the Armada, James the first coming to the throne in 1603. That coin was in circulation or in England when all those things were going on, all those things were happening, and finally somehow made its way here in the purse or pocket of one of those early colonists and got lost.
Gilbert says the plan is to interpret some of that history before putting it on display here in Cupid's, hopefully by next summer. Chris O'Neill Yates, CBC News, Cupid's, Newfoundland.
Cool. Canada's men's soccer team is in the middle of an important match right now in Edmonton. They're playing Costa Rica in the final round of the CONCACAF World Cup qualifier. Through one half, the game is still scoreless despite some great chances for the home team.
The anticipation is there. You stack your good corner off the bar. Canada comes that close.
No kidding. After this game, Canada will host Mexico on Tuesday, again in Edmonton. That will be their 8th game of 14 in this final round of qualifying. 8 teams are competing for a berth at the 2022 World Cup, but only the top 3 will make it to Qatar. Canada is currently holding on to the 3rd spot behind Mexico and the United States. Good luck, boys. Thanks for being with us tonight and all this week on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch our program on CBC Gem, or that's the free app, or on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, and as always on our website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is at 11 o'clock tonight with Isabel Regame after the National, and Anita Bath will be back in the chair on Monday at 6. Good night, enjoy the weekend, stay dry.